Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Bonjour. It's a pleasure to welcome you, albeit virtually, to the International Peace Institute, Middle East and North Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my friends, let me start by thanking you for joining IPI MENA today to discuss a very important and challenging matter, the structural challenges and transformative factors in the MENA region. As you all know, it's not a breaking news that the Middle East and North Africa region is one of the most disintegrated and less organized regions in the world. There is no regional organization that encompasses all countries in the region. The regional mechanisms that were established in the 20th century have proven inadequate for the 21st century and beyond. By working towards mutual objectives, regional integration reinforces cooperation and solidarity to address the existential crises that the world faces, such as financial recession, climate change, and rising populism. Regional integration is the outcome of wider democratization processes, often linked with the values such as peace, security, sustainable development, and respect for human rights, as it encourages the melding of countries' political, economic, and social domains. Today, there are several regional integration realities globally, of different forms, of course, and varying levels of integration, such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, the African Union, AU. However, the emergence of the European Union following the end of the Second World War is considered as an adequate developing model for or of regional integration thus far. As more barriers were removed and infrastructure, roads, railways, and airports enable greater movement of people, goods, and capital as means of achieving deeper integration and cooperation, the need to reinforce a more developed system of rules to govern it in order to ensure the protection of all stakeholders became essential. Acknowledging there is no size fits for all, it needs to be emphasized that a homegrown solution is required for success of such an exercise, regional integration in the Middle East and North Africa. However, to ensure its success, it needs to be built on objectives of foundations of common denominators, the nexus of good governance that remains at the forefront of all international organizations. In line with this, I look forward to hearing the insights and expertise of our key guest, His Excellency Dr. Nassif Hatti. Nassif Hatti, former Foreign Minister of Lebanon, and he will be followed by Her Excellency Ms. Basma Soudani, Director of Cabinet of Political Affairs and Information in the Arab Maghreb Union, AMU, UMA as it's known in the Francophone North Africa. But before I give the floor to Dr. Hatti, I would like to remind the audience to please use the chat function or raise your hands whenever we open the floor to ensure that we have a good debate and discussion. I will say a few words about Nassif, my friend. Nassif has a very, very long experience in diplomacy and academy. He joined the Arab League in 1981 when he was only 5. 1985 to 1899, he was in Ottawa, Canada, member of LAS mission. 1991-20, he was in Cairo, diplomatic advisor to the Secretary General of the League of Arab States. And then in Paris, as ambassador, head of mission of the same Arab League. 2013-14, advisor and personal spokesman to the Secretary General of the Arab League. He went then to Italy as ambassador. January, August, he returned to Beirut, where he took the functions of Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigrants in Lebanon. And I might add to his credit that he is among the few, not the only, ministers who resigned from his job without further comment on that. As far as our guest, Madame Basma Soudani, she is, as I said, Chief of Staff or Chef de Cabinet of the Arab Maghreb Union, headquartered in Rabat, Morocco. She is a feminist, a lobbyist, political activist. She's a networker, an incubator who is able to get ideas off the ground in order to make an impact in society. Needless to say that she is one of the Tunisian top diplomats to have been picked for the job as chef de cabinet. Without further delay, I'd like to invite His Excellency Nassif Hatti to share with us a few remarks on the, as I said, the structural challenges and transformative factors in the Middle East and North Africa region. Nassif, you have the floor.
Thank you, my dear friend. Let me be very brief to allow for more discussions and perhaps interventions and interruptions to have it much more lively. I'll take my first remark to what I consider that we live in a disordered regional order. The Middle East is made of a disordered or anarchical regional order for a very simple reasons. The traditional rules that govern usually and organize relations among states, neo-Westphalian rule, you cannot go to the Westphalian system as it was because of many changes that emerged over time, are not there. So that is not the logic of state in dealing between states, which means how to manage conflict, how to contain conflict, how to escalate, so on and so to speak. And this allows more and more for a more active role encouraged by certain states of non-state actors to act on behalf of certain states in conducting certain policies and intervening in the name of supranational ideologies in the affairs of other states. So the legitimate game of interstate relations has been really eroded to a large extent. There are some aspects of return to normalcy, but not yet entirely through this process. Non-state actors are becoming much more important. They deterritorialize political actions. You would see in Syria that a second, third generation Maghrebi from Europe is coming to fight in Syria in the name of Allah, in the name of God, for instance. So what we're seeing here are these kind of transnational movements which add to having this anarchical regional order, acting because of certain capacity to mobilize by acting in many instances directly and indirectly on behalf of certain states' policies. My second remark, very briefly, to allow for more debate, the proliferation not of nuclear war, nuclear arms, of something that's not less dangerous, what I call failed and failing states. What we could see, and Nejib had the chance to discuss that, you and I, last summer in Tunis, the proliferation of the number of failing states that will turn immediately after into becoming a failed state. The Somalization is there. The Somalization is proliferating with all the respect to our Somalian friends. A state of the sort not only is a problem for its own population, it attracts, it begs interference and intervention in the names of different interests, and it adds to a chaotic situation. My third remark, very briefly, is the revival of subnational identities, which lead to transnational solidarities and to a more chaotic order. Subnational identities, each state, each nation is made of different subnational identities, but the issue is not having that alone. subnational identities is a diversity within unity. But in the case of most of our states, I said not all, most of our states, they replaced the national identity. They are the product of a failure of national construction in these states, where they come to create a new belonging that goes beyond the borders of this particular country. All the isms in the past, from Arab nationalisms, certain forms, to Islamism, all forms, come to replace the national identity. It's not unity and diversity as we understand it, which is a source of enrichment, of legitimation of a nation and of a state. It's something of a dislocation of that matter. And thus it begs interference and intervention, and it makes the nation state to be much more vulnerable to interferences and intervention. My fourth remark goes, and you have to admit it, to the failure of many of our states in the process of national construction. The states preceded nations in many instances, not all states, and they failed to do that. And this is what brings us to the need, which I will say it now, of a new social contract. We need a new social contract to renew or a new social contract, to modernize a social contract as the relationship between the state and the society, as the basic source of legitimation of political action and of societal stabilization. The absence of these matters, again, begged interference and intervention. My fifth remark is what I call something that occurred at the regional level. We always had a pan-Arab ideology that was used even by most of our Arab government as a source of legitimation of a political action beyond the borders. It could be conservative, it could be radical, doesn't matter. It was used again against some radical faction within certain states. What we have seen is, in the last 30 years, is the de-Arabization of a regional order because of this failure of this ideology to promote things, because also, unfortunately, for many reasons, of the breakdown of what I call locomotive effect of a certain understanding among key Arab states to be the locomotive, like Germany and France in Europe, to be the locomotive of the Arab regional order. And I'm saying Arab regional order from Mauritania to Oman. In general, they were replaced because of this failure, to many reasons, of this political vacuum. Nature hates vacuum, political nature hates more vacuum. They were replaced by two returning empires, two returning states with imperial appetite, like any state that was having an imperial role in the past, using this time Islamism, surfing on another transnational ideology to create legitimacy. I'm sure having in mind Iran and Turkey. Though things have changed now for Turkey, for Iran, it's still almost the same. This is another factor that added to the chaotic situation in the region. My sixth remark, and again very briefly, goes to what I call the emergence of a trilogy of war. It's not the trilogy of Najib Mahfouz, it's another trilogy. What is the trilogy of war in the region? We have a regional civil war. When we see someone coming from the Maghreb, or originally from the Maghreb, to fight in the Mashriq, or someone coming from the Gulf to fight in the Maghreb in the name of a certain transnational ideologies, that's a regional civil war that's occurring. His ummah, his nation, is not the nation state that exists. Most of those coming to fight in Syria are not fighting because they want to change the regime, having more democratic or less democratic, socialistic or whatever. They are fighting in the name of a larger ummah than the Syrian nation state ummah, and same in Iraq, so on to speak, either subnational or supranational. So one is this regional civil war. Second one is a return to what we have seen in the 60s, a regional Cold War. My late professor, and he was my professor, Malcolm Kerr, produced a fascinating book on the 60s in the Arab world, the Arab Cold War. And we have that kind of Cold War that is fought now at the regional level, not within the Arab world, bringing Iran and Turkey. It goes up and it goes down, but its bases are there. Try to denigrate, question the legitimacy of the other in the name of that kind of policy. And the third level of wars are civil wars. And each one of the three levels of war feeds into the two others in both ways. So basically, this is the interplay among the three wars. We could see, for instance, very simply, if you look at Syria, from day one, what started as a internal Syrian conflict turned immediately, it was hijacked by proxy wars and proxy conflicts by regional power and international power, to the effect that the Syrian part of it became less important. It became almost entirely marginalized. Look at Yemen, look, if you want, at the case of Libya, so on and so to speak. Immediately it was hijacked. Doesn't mean that there is no local reason, or with a capital R, or reasons, but it was hijacked, and they were hijacked by other matters. That's a very important thing which I like to look at. Another important issue in this process of, fawda, which I call as that, it's the confrontation between the two Ds, between demography and development. Reports, again, Nejib, we had the discussion last summer about other things. The lopsided development in the Arab world, the absence of comprehensive development, has created a very dangerous and difficult situation that many warned about. Many UNDP reports warned against that, especially with an increasing demography, young demography. That could be a double-edged issue. If it was well managed, it could be a source of progress, of development. If it's not well managed, it could be a source of problem. This is what I call the clash between the two Ds: development, but actually lopsided development, and really an expanding demography with a very high percentage. I think our region has the highest percentage of youngsters in the world, which is against a great potential for progress, for development, but a great source of instability if it's not well addressed. The proliferation, another important matter, of isms, which I mentioned en passant au début, ideologies, political Islamism of all its forms, create a chaotic situation, because the concept of fighting, the concept of change, the concept of difference is not within a nation state as we know them. It's against a concept that goes beyond that kind of nation state. Last but not least, 2 points. One is about the Palestinian issue, the Arab-Israeli conflict, which was shelved for many reasons. I'm not talking from an emotional or a matter of principle, but I am saying from a strictly also realistic perspective. Unless this issue of identity, of territorial national identity, is addressed, it could remain a source of disturbance, being hijacked by any political actor in the region and outside the region for reasons and goals that have nothing to do with the Palestinian issue. The settlement of this conflict is very clear: a two-state solution that will close down this issue. The Arab world, in one of the, I think, most important moments of its history, 20 years ago, I was a direct witness there as a diplomat in Beirut, adopted in Beirut at the Arab League summit meeting, the Arab Peace Initiative, which was a most comprehensive, courageous, realistic initiative to close this issue and not allow to be used to serve goals which have nothing to do with the Palestinian issue. Last but not least, what security structure we need in this region. I'm not saying a security structure that must replace the existing regional frameworks, whether the Arab League, the GCC, the Arab Maghreb Union. We can talk always of a complex architecture, but we need to think of a security structure that doesn't bring everybody in one shop. You have to begin with normal diplomatic relations among states that could conduct or that could carry friendly or unfriendly relations to sit together. What I look at as a good beginning was the Baghdad meeting of last year, 28th of August, 21. And Baghdad too is expected to be held this year, before the end of this year, hopefully, in Amman. As you know, it's a good fora to create, perhaps, or to set the motion or to set the stage for creating what I call a Helsinki process in the region, like in 75. We have differences, yes, but you are not here to speak over each other's head. We are here to act as states, focusing on identifying areas of differences, knowing how to de-escalate tension, how to contain them, how not to allow them to impact on areas of cooperation which we need to identify or move on forward. Such a concept is extremely important that embraces everybody according to two very well important principles which which were created in the EU process from the days of the European communities, plusieurs vitesses, Europe at plusieurs vitesses, different speeds, and geometry variable. Not everybody must jump in the same pool when he is not or is not interested in this area of cooperation, and not everybody must move according to the slowest part. So what we need is a complex set of forum. I'm looking forward to the coming meeting, hopefully, that could really give a shot in Amman, that could give a shot in the arm for such a process. Thank you, and I'm sorry if I, abuse of the time.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Excellency. It was an excellent presentation. You covered all aspects of this, I would say, realistic but gloomy picture of the situation. However, you opened our eyes and hearts on some dose of optimism and realism towards the future. I would not rephrase what you have done. I will cite two key elements that you mentioned. First, the need for a social contract between state and society. This is, I think, a prerequisite before engaging into any process of integration, transborder integration. That will, of course, englobe the region concerns and their dimension. Here, we would not limit ourselves to the Arab League map, as you mentioned, that it maybe limited the Arab world to some 1940s, 45 ideologies or visions. We have extensions or dimensions that go from the Mediterranean to Sub-Sahara to Asia, etc. I will give the floor to our guest, Basma Soudani, the Chief of Staff or Cabinet of the Arab Maghreb Union, who will also open another chapter on where this mostly the Maghreb region is working, is maybe opening other windows, I would say, towards Africa, and how, in theory, this Arab Maghreb Union is working, hoping that the relations between all countries will develop and allow a more healthy background for the for Maghreb peoples to integrate. And of course, that would be a good step towards looking into a more MENA integration process. My dear friend, Basma, you have the floor.
You're muted.
You're muted. Hello?
Yeah. Is it fine now?
Go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. So thank you so much for your invitation today, and I'm really happy to be with you in this webinar, and I would like myself also to welcome Mr. Nassif Hati, His Excellency. And I will go straight forward to your remark about the known state actors and energetic regional order and the failure of state, and all of these sad, I will say, and gloomy picture. And I will join you to say that this is the reality when we talk about the MENA as a group, as a state group. But I will maybe talk about UMA as a part of the MENA, and also UMA as a part of Africa, since the Maghreb region is a part of Africa, and we realized, all of us, all of these issue that you are saying, but we are trying in Arab Maghreb Union, UMA, as it is known in French, Union du Maghreb Arabe, since 2016, when Mr. Bakouche started as a head of this institution, we started to look to other or a new relationship with Africa as a REC, as a regional economic community. And I will talk about some fruitful example on this. I mean, in this sense. So UMA is a part of the MENA and Middle East region. However, its ties are stronger with Africa and Western Europe, given that UMA is one of the 8 regional economic community RECs of the African Union. The African Union considers the regional economic community as the pillars of the economic integration of the continent. These communities have, to their credit, important gains in the area of trade, infrastructure, and regional public goods, including peace and security. The Arab region is increasing confronted with crises that have become epidemic. The Palestinian crisis, the Iraqi crisis, and here I join you in some really crises since the Gulf War, the Yemeni crisis, aggravated by religious consideration, Sunni supported by the Arab countries on the Gulf, and Shiite Houthi backed by Iran, Syrian crisis globalized, Sahara crisis relevant to the UN, which is slow dot the ease, and which fuels the Algerian-Moroccan conflict. Including in such a context, we are far from the integration objectives, including for the UMA region, which has nevertheless had an institutional framework for a third of a century with general integration as its final objective. And here we ask in which areas we can speak of advancement and progress, or on the contrary of total or partial blockage. Why the UMA region? Does this region represent a geopolitical entity, or it is a zone in crisis, as you said? And I'm just repeating differently what you said, Ms. Nassif. Mr. Nassif, sorry. It is part of a geopolitical division decided by the United States within the framework of the NATO strategy. It is true that North Africa is part of the Arab world, which has an African wings and an Asian wing. We cannot say that it is a region that it is really structured like the European Union, despite the existence of a League of the Arab States, as you said. Can we speak on a regional integration in the MENA zone? The MENA zone is not structured, and it is experiencing many crises, and some crises, those outcomes we do not yet see. We cannot therefore speak of integration. Can we speak on integration in its western part, the UMA, for example? The Arab Maghreb Union, which is part of the region, maintains regular and important link, although not structured by Western European within the framework of the 5+5 dialogue, which serve as a sub-regional forum for the 10 countries of Western Mediterranean, which have taken part in it since its creation. 5 are the north of the Mediterranean Sea, as you know, Spain, France, Italy, Malta, Portugal, and 5 are located in the south of it, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, Mauritania, and Tunisia. It constitutes one of the first successful initiatives, even if it's not formal, between Mediterranean countries and introduction of the structures that were erected during the Barcelona process from 1995. So why is needed to be able to talk about integration in the Arab Maghreb Union? To integrate, UMA member states must remove barriers to trade and investment and connect their infrastructure networks. The progressive elimination of barrier to enter regional trade, the construction of regional infrastructure, and the improvement of the business environment will stimulate trade within the Maghreb and contribute to further integration into global values chain. It should also be noted that a peaceful environment is mandatory to promote investment and trade. And here I join you about all of these movements that started for the Shabab and so on and so forth, and foster integration. It is this perspective that the UMA General Secretariat is working to promote integration in the Maghreb region. The flagship projects that were launched by UMA after 2016 are part of a regional perspective within the framework of integration, according to the aspirations of the 2063 agenda of the African Union. And here we can ask, in which areas is the work making progress? Among the sectors on which the UMA works is the infrastructure sector, which plays a dominant role within the Maghreb countries. In this context, several large-scale projects have been defined and initiated. They concern in particular the construction of motorway access called Road of Maghreb Unity. This motorway with a length of 7,344 kilometers by its layout will be able to serve 55 Maghreb cities or more than 50 million inhabitants, 22 international airports, main universities, the main port and railway terminals, and the main industrial and tourist areas in the region. It is part of an international road system with planned connection to the east, north, and south. In the field of rail transport, there is a continuous link between Casablanca, Algiers, and Tunis, which has existed for 80 years. The rail route is 2,350 kilometers. A feasibility study has been completed under the aegis of the Arab Maghreb Union in 2018 for the rehabilitation and mobilization of this link to relaunch the Maghreb train. Transport being linked to communication. What about ICT? Maghreb cooperation in the field of the information and communication technology, ICT, has enabled the realization of the Ibn Khaldun optical cable project, which cost more than $30 million and which connected the three Arab Maghreb Union countries, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, in the field of telephone communication. In addition, under the aegis of a specialized ministerial council, the Arab Maghreb Union, with the help of the African Development Bank financing, carried out two studies aimed at establishing a harmonization of the legal and regulatory framework of the ICT sector in the Maghrebian scale and to establish a secure, high-speed telecommunications network based in fiber optics. The question is, are the infrastructures threatened by terrorism? and you talked about terrorism previously, is their strategy. Several efforts and results are added in various sectors, namely peace and security, by developing Maghreb security studies and strategy, the establishment of a Maghreb early warning system through the establishment of a data collection and analysis room within the General Secretariat, the signing of a cooperation protocols, capacity building also. In addition to the efforts and initiative provided by the General Secretariat to find solutions to existing conflicts between certain Arab Maghreb Union member countries, and our General Secretary is trying his best to do so. Since infrastructures are at the service of economic development, what strategy for the Ummah in this area? On the economic level, in 2017, we coordinated the work by the adoption of the Maghreb Action Plan for the strengthening of intra-African trade, BIAT. Moreover, UMA is the first REC, which means Regional Economic Community at the African level, to have adopted its action plan with the realization of concrete actions at the level of all clusters. The UMA General Secretariat also contributed to the work that led to the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area, named ZLECAF, as a broader legal framework on the African continent and aimed not only at trade facilitation, but also to the promotion of investment and services with high potential. These initiatives are among the flagship projects of the African Agenda 2063 and respond perfectly to the orientations of the Maghreb Common Development Strategy and the Marrakech Treaty establishing the Arab Maghreb Union. In this context, it should be noted that the 5 Maghreb countries since the African country free trade agreements is in 2018. I will move to the conclusion and not focus on the other examples in economic sector and in security. So to conclude, despite the efforts made by the RECs, which mean the regional economic region and their member countries, intra-African trade remained limited, mainly due to non-tariff barriers, although most of them have abolished tourist visa. The people's movement remains limited because the communities have not yet put into practices the principles of the right to residence and settlement for member countries' nationals. The African Economic Community can still become a reality if the regional economic communities can receive the necessary support to solve the problem that beside them, and if the continent's leaders continue to apply the directives in favor of the integration process. As a result, the conditions for regional integration in all areas, which is the strategic objective per excellence, are hardly materialized and do not correspond to the long-awaited legitimate aspirations of the population of the region. The major handicap remain political, as you said before. As a result, civil society and the private sector have a duty to come into play to remedy the political shortcomings. This would result in solution to these problems, which can only be the result of concerted political will and decision, which are currently lacking. Arab Maghreb countries are not currently moving toward the construction of a coherent regional bloc. The multiplication of trade agreements and the lack of harmonization in the trade policies of the Maghreb countries encourage vertical integration and logic of bilateral negotiation in agreements with other regional economic blocs at the expense of horizontal links. This generated trade creations for the benefit of third-party partners on the detriment of the UMA countries, taking into account what has been presented and the geopolitical changes in particular, the interest shown by the Maghreb countries in Africa. The question that arises is the integration of the UMA in the African Union and whether it would be a solution to the problem and how continental or bilateral REC or country so the African Union favors the development of the RECs, which mean the regional economic communities, which is considered to be its fundamental pillars. This could be the subject of another important debate between us. Is it this one of the solution, or we have to look forward to other solution and to tackle these issues and problems together as an MENA region? So thank you for your attention, and I hope I didn't took a lot of time in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And as you have further elaborated on the challenges, and as the headline is the, in fact, structural challenges, it was suggested by Minister Nassif Hatti, we will agree that, as you said, the objectives are hardly materialized. This is a very diplomatic assessment, and you looked into where some transformative factors in the MENA region could enter into game to solve or try to work together. I think it's a work that I appreciate a lot your reference to the need for the private sector and civil society to engage further. We know that they are dynamic, although they remain paralyzed by the fact that there is the big lack or deficit of political will at the highest level. I don't know if Minister Nassif would like to add one element or two, because I think it begs for further comments. The floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Soudani, for this very interesting, rich and enriching presentation. As you said, what applies to this organization in general does apply to another organization, is that you plan, but we need a very important variable called the political variable for implementation. And as long really as economics is not liberated, economic cooperation, different forms of economic cooperation in the comprehensive manner of economics, liberated from political, calculation, sometimes short-term political calculation, we cannot move forward. I always look at the experience of the European Union as a successful experience in this respect, where you have what we call the salami tactic. You slice the issue and you deal with issues apart without allowing one issue to become entirely jailed or imprisoned in other political, let me say, conflicts, so on and so to speak. One important matter that we need here to look at is that cooperation at a small level, small group level, small club level, that feeds always into larger cooperation. A success within the GCC or within UMA is a success for the larger Arab League, and the opposite is equally true, because they do feed into each other. Let's remember that matter, it's important. But we need to proceed. Again, I'm drawing on the European experience with what we call plusieurs vitesses, different speeds. If we can move forward, whether at UMA or even two UMAs and two non-UMAs, because of they do have, potential for cooperation faster than other, then we must move faster than other. And the principle of geometry variable, I'm not repeating myself, that we might work to develop integration in one particular area rather than in other area. Why? Because we do have potential in this particular area, and we do have elements of complementarity. And here I would like to add another, what I consider an important factor, is the trans-Med relations. Mrs. Soudani mentioned that, the 5+5, I would add, of course, the 5+12, I would add the Euro-Arab dialogue, I would add the Barcelona process, and I will add at the end of the day, the Euro-Med partnership today, or Union for the Med. And here we do have a strong potential out of necessity for cooperation. Out of necessity for cooperation that feels, I just mentioned something, Nejib, I was participating in one of the preparatory meetings, the Barcelona process, in my Lebanese capacity, not Arabese capacity. And I told my European counterparts, there were few around the table, I said, look, if you don't have, and I was not very diplomatic, if you don't help exporting part of the solution, you're going to import most of the problems. Interdependence is there. It's not a choice. So we have to work together. It doesn't mean I'm throwing my problems on the back of somebody else, on the table of somebody else. We have to do our part of the job, but we need to work in complementarity. That's very important. And trans-Med relations, like Mrs. Soudani has mentioned, is a very important area. So is UMA within the African Union. So is the GCC, so is the Arab League, and so on. So basically, it's a very complex set of interdependencies that should force us, and I underline force us, where we have now new challenges. Look at the climatic challenges today and the repercussions on desertification, on food security, on displacement of people, on hard security issues. Soft security issues could turn into hard security issues on the southern and eastern shores of the Mediterranean. They do necessitate our cooperation, whether within Africa, Arab Maghreb Union, the Arab world in general, and or with Europe. So basically, it's very important to try to have a systematic approach in a comprehensive fashion, but working on issue area-based approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. This is further, I would say, elaboration on the huge challenge in its structural, political, and even cultural dimensions. We refer to the European Union as an example, and I think I said in my opening remarks that it is a source of inspiration, but any initiative or any effort towards region integration in the MENA region, as you said, with its dimensions, Africa, both of you, the African dimension, the Mediterranean dimension, the Asian dimension, has to be homegrown. I mean, we remember that the European, we read that the European idea of the European Union, which came after the continent, the old continent, was the theater of the worst conflicts, and you name it, worse than any other part of the world, from political, clanic, religious, imperial, and so forth. It took a man with a group of people who were far-sighted, Jean Monnet, who wrote a simple document that it felt like a timely phenomenon grasped by the countries, or the main countries, and the two main leaders in Europe, de Gaulle and Adenauer, and they backed the group of thinkers who established at that time, the European Communities for Coal and Steel. Now, what you mentioned, climate change, Nassif, Basmat mentioned the railway, the infrastructure. They are very important elements and commodities. Where do you think we should, as civil society and private sector think towards mobilizing a general debate towards concrete processes to maybe take it from bottom to up to influence the goodwill or the political will.
Well, I wanted to say, if I may just add one point, that the civil society has a special responsibility in tackling these issues and presenting practical ideas of working together. There are certain issues where is multilateralism through different forms is becoming a necessity. It's no more a choice. I'm not talking about multilateralism like in the past, making common declaration. I'm talking about issue-based multilateral cooperation, climatic changes, its repercussions in a certain field, its implications in another field. What should we do about it is a very important matter. So the civil society, experts, and people of the sort must get together to identify areas that have imminent, dangerous repercussions if we do nothing about them. That's one thing. And to sort out ideas, practical ideas, on how to address them collectively, to develop a sort of roadmap on how to address these issues. And I mentioned once in one discussion about the transmed relations that we need a table of 4 legs, the official leg, another leg of economic issues to be addressed by people who are in the economic field, a third leg of social and cultural matters, and the 4th leg is of civil society and NGOs working together. Of course, the first leg is the leg of decision-making, but the first leg alone cannot do anything, cannot replace the 3 other legs who feed directly and indirectly with ideas, with suggestions, with a roadmap, with a practical roadmap on how to work together, on how to address collectively and in the best way the challenges that everybody is facing.
Thank you. I will open the floor for further questions from the audience. Your Excellencies, dear friends, any questions؟ أي سؤال من السادة والسيدات الحاضرين؟ Yes, I see Abdel Nabi Akri.
My question is that when we address the tasks of now contemporary tasks of Arab League like climate change, or when we address such tasks to the Arab Maghreb Union on need for integration or economic integration and projects, did we ask our question is that how this paralysis of the Arab League? I mean, Arab League is not from today, but for a long time, but mostly maybe is unable to resolve relations or conflicts or issues that are pertaining, that are becoming chronic to the extent that everybody now knows that Arab League cannot address serious question or serious issues, and it is all mostly resolved or left to the outside interference. I mean, if you take any of the, in addition that the relationship, we are asking for normalization of relationship because there is hostility relationship among the members of the Arab League. There are even wars, there are conflicts, there are. So how can we speak about, or we wish that such projects, I mean, group projects that are endeavored by the Arab League, but how can it be? How can it be if there is no normal relationship? There is no recognition that each recognize the others and work with the others. The same thing with Maghreb. Maghreb, there has been no summit now for, I don't know, for maybe a decade now. There has not been meeting. It's actually a banner rather than real structure. And we know the crisis among the Maghreb countries, among Arab Maghreb countries. And maybe could I suggest, can we think of, I mean, relation Maghreb, a strong Maghreb, excluding Egypt, which is a continuation of geographically to the North Africa? This is just last comment. I think when we say MENA, MENA region. Let us speak first about the Arab world. Let's say, if there is no base, if there is no, let's say, healthy relationships within the Arab world, you cannot establish any such projects, regional projects, neither with Europe or with West Asia.
Before giving the floor, thank you, Nabi. Before giving the floor to Nassif, I think the question to be asked, has the initial map of the Arabism or the Arab Union been helpful to the Arab countries to develop a hoped scheme of integration, or being limited to the Arab countries or nations, as they call themselves, has it deprived them from a broader, broader dimensions, as I keep saying, which are Africa, the Mediterranean, and Asia? This is the question that, of course, Nassif and Basma will tackle. And my question to Abdel Nabi is also, how do you think, as a civil society activist, the civil society will or should contribute or answer the questions posed by our speakers and our public opinions? Nassif.
Yes, let me.
Abdel Nabi, wait a little bit. Abdel Nabi,
Okay.
wait, please, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, just to answer, I think what applies to the Arab League applies to a very great extent to the Arab Maghreb Union, which are countries member of the Arab Leagues, and they exhibit somehow, all these countries, most of them, the same feature in politics. What we suffer from is what we call, what I've labeled 16 years back, and I was an official of the Arab League, what I labeled as a diplomacy of schizophrenia. It was not a very diplomatic statement on my behalf. What I said, we adopt collectively a decision, regardless of the name of the organization, but we never implement that decision, though the decision is supposed to be implemented. When many suggested that we should have a follow-up committee within the organization to ask states, it's not to step on their toes. When you support a resolution, you're supposed to apply this resolution, but resolutions are made and shelved within the regional organization, regardless of the name of the organization, and they are not really applied. That's a basic problem. The issue is not that we don't have many elements of complementarity within the Arab world that necessitate cooperation out of interest, not out of emotion, out of strictly interest, not emotion. And you have many common factors. The same culture allows, the same language facilitate cooperation, geographic proximity, complementarity among elements of production. But these are necessary but not sufficient conditions, because there is, what I say, no accountability in putting in application decisions adopted. And there is a tendency to hide behind the Secretariat General of the organization, whether called Arab League, I'm sorry, also UMA or others, to say that they didn't do. These are executive bodies. Who should do are the states, member states, who adopt resolutions. They are the legislative body, and they're supposed to apply resolution they adopted. The idea of an early warning system, we spoke about it also within the Arab League. You need to develop an early warning system to detect the crisis. But more important, as I said, the follow-up on applications of resolutions. Otherwise, you don't have any accountability at all. And this is the reason why I go back to what I call the diplomacy of schizophrenia in many of our organizations, where we collectively adopt a resolution that we never implemented, because sometimes it's written in a language calling on, condemning, asking for, inviting. They are not operationalized languages. What do you want? You have to operationalize the language of the resolutions. And that's a key problem and key feature, negative feature of collective multilateral Arab cooperation, regardless of the level at which we are cooking.
Yeah, thank you. Let me take some other questions, and then I will give the floor to Basma. And I see that Seima from the Turkish embassy has a question. Seima?
Thank you so much, Mr. Nejib, for letting me say some words. Thank you so much for the speakers. which the remarks and assessments about the MENA region, the structural challenges that the region faced, is very beneficial and brainstorming. But I would like to say there is just one part that His Excellency Nassif Hitti said about Turkey's imperial goals in the region. Actually, we cannot agree with his claims, but Turkey has not have any imperial goals in the region, does not have any claims over anybody's land or anybody's interests. Our foreign policy evolved and shaped upon just one fundamental goal, which is set by the founder of the Republic, which is peace at home, peace in the world. So I would like to say that the imperial goals, imperial aims of Turkey, we cannot accept that claim. But thank you so much for letting me the floor.
Nejib, let me just explain one point.
Let me put, I know because
this is not what was meant, and there was a period where Turkey was speaking over heads of states when they were adopting the Islamist thing and saying this is a good government, this is not. It returned after to normalcy. I was talking about a specific period at a moment when we need all the time to have the best of relations with Turkey because we have common things. But basically, I was talking about one particular period when they espoused entirely the Arab Muslimhood movements and they started saying this regime is not legitimate and that regime is not legitimate. This has came to an end. So that's the period I was talking about, to be very specific.
This is how exactly understood your remark and your the conclusion of your remark. My dear, Your Excellency Seima, as we mentioned in the three presentations, or the three paths, that the regional integration cannot be achieved without the natural dimension, and of course that includes your country. Could you, not now, maybe in a few minutes, give us your insight about how your country views the sane, healthy, integrated relations with the region? I will also add or invite the ambassador of Bangladesh to put his question, and then we will get back to the answers. John Maguire will give you the floor later. Ambassador of Bangladesh, please.
He had to leave. He apologized.
He apologized. Okay, the John Maguire from the British School of Polytechnic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nejib. A fascinating webinar, absolutely wonderful to hear. And obviously, as an outsider, I've been intrigued by it. I posed my question in the chat. I was reading a historical article saying that, which I think was linked to this, saying that Qatari foreign policy was very much based over the last 10 years on the threat of invasion, that actually the invitation of the US Air Force to set up in Qatar was based on that, and even deriving down to even the FIFA World Cup to that. My question was to the panelists, do we think that is a very legitimate threat, a threat from invasion from other Arab nations? And will the current boundaries, do you think, be redrawn either politically or forcefully?
Thank you, John. I will add another question put by the Bangladesh ambassador before he left. How you use demographic dividend of MENA for development? It's an excellent question. I think the question is put to both panelists. I'll let you both answer, John, and then afterwards we'll give Abdel Nabi the floor.
I leave it to my eminent colleague because I spoke more. She could answer first.
Basma, go ahead, please. Is Basma still with us?
Yes, but she's just muted.
Basma, you are muted, Basma. Yes, Basma, can you unmute her, Dalia?
I clicked ask to unmute. She has to unmute her side. Yeah.
Is it good now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Sorry. So I will go to your question, Mr. Nejib, first, which is the migration in the MENA. And I will just tackle a little bit this question. When we talk about the Maghreb migration specifically, we talk about jihadists, we talk about illegal migration, we talk about all of these issues. So in our secretariat, we started the study, and we have some numbers about the migration of the mindset of the youth that they go and work in Europe, and not only in Europe, now even in Africa. So, for example, I will give an example. In Tunisia last year, there is 39,000 Tunisian young engineer, that they left the country, which means the university and the public university, they 6,500 they give a diploma to engineers. 4,500 of them leave the country every single year. And about doctors, 3,000 doctors from Tunisia left Tunisia also last year, and even before in the Corona crisis, which means this is bring to us a very important question: youth in the MENA region and in North Africa. I'm talking about North Africa. They are specifically in this period leaving their countries, thinking that they will find a better world outside. But not only the illegal migration, not only jihadists, because we have to think about what we are giving and offering to the other countries from our admira, as we said in Arabic. So I would like to maybe tackle this issue in one of your webinar also. I will go back to the civil society if you give me the floor to answer the importance of the civil society in our MENA region. And in general in all states. And we know that the civil society is very important as une force de proposition, not only to say no to the governments, not only to be a part of the revolutions. Is it important that civil society come through their think tank, from their studies, from their link to the populations with some solution? But they are limited. They cannot apply. They cannot go far. The politicians and the states has to adapt and to work with the civil society and with the public and with the private sector to go straight forward and to implement and to be in harmonization, both of them together. And I will stop there, and if there is any question, I'm ready to answer it.
Yes, Abdel Nabi, and then I might go back to Seima if she has a few comments to add to my question.
Yes, okay, thank you, Nejib. Concerning the civil society role in the Arab world or in Maghreb, if we take well, there are, of course, some slogans, there are some banners, but let us face the reality. The reality is that the civil society is related to the nature of the state, nature of the society itself. If the state is not democratic, is not civic, if the civil society, if the society itself is not tolerant, is not diverse, is not have a role in let's say in deciding the higher policies and with representation of a state in let's say in sound government. I don't say Republican or royalist. So the result is that under our situation in the civil society is marginalized. It's marginalized. It is even in many cases called civil society, but it is either religious or tribal or regional or so. So we need we need to change the environment. We need to change the policies. The policy of the government, of the state, I don't say the government because state is should trust or should not be authoritarian, should not be unilateral in its decision. It should realize and believe and committed that in multilateralism, which is not there in the Arab world in general, with very few exceptions that you, for example, just a minute.
Nabi,
yes, sorry, but what I mean is that there is a need that the state should be committed to multilateralism, and the society should be also committed to that, and that the state should be civic, and this should be not, let's say we have the phenomena of gongos, for example. This should seed what civil society organization should emanate from voluntarism and commitments to the public service and the duties. That's why, unfortunately, in most of the Arab world, we don't see a vibrant civil society which like the West. I mean, you don't have similar organizations that are deeply rooted, that are sustainable, that are historic. I mean, that's why you find some societies even that emerge and seed and finish in few years, or just a banner. We need to change the policies. We need to change the strategy in order to include the civil society.
Thank you very much, Nabi. I think that brings us back to what Nassif said at the outset, the need for a new social contract, and that would tackle seriously and broadly the state-society ties in part of the region. And I think this was it's kind of music in my ears, because during the 2011 events that shook the Middle East and North Africa region, IPI was among the first organizations that put this question to the member countries, calling for a need to review the very important relation between state and society. And I think we will go back to that in a more specific and more, I would say, focused look at how we view the future or the improvement of state-society relations. Can I go back to Seima, if she's, if I remember well, she will enlighten us on how she views the role of her country in the regional integration of this part of the world.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nejib. I did clearly understand that His Excellency, Mr. Hitti, was talking about a specific period of time, but that specific period of time, that movements, they were elected by their people in their countries. So what Turkey is trying to achieve in the region is, as you mentioned, as His Excellency mentioned, an integrated, a prosperous regional prospects for all of us. Because as His Excellency Minister mentioned very clearly, the failed states, increasing the number of failed states is the last thing that we would like to face with it. It's a huge challenge for not only the country and their people, but for all the region. And it has global impacts as well. So I believe what Turkish policy fundamentally try to do is boosting regional cooperation, facilitating negotiations, facilitating peaceful and political processes in all the countries, in all our neighboring countries. So it's very high time to, cooperate in a much more useful, fruitful ways, I believe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any further comments? We have taken enough time, and I think this is a beginning of a series of meetings and brainstorming sessions. Do I see any further comments? Otherwise, I will give the floor to Nassif and Basma for concluding remarks towards what's next. Que faire?
Yeah, let me say, Nejib, two things. Perhaps Ms. Sima misunderstood what I meant. I spoke about one point. If we need to have stability in the region, we need to address two variables. One is a social contract, and it's for each and every society and state to do it at home. A new social contract, a more inclusive social contract that need to be revisited every now and then, which will assure societal stability, not invited instability. The second matter is to have a normal state order. To go back, when I spoke about a particular era in Turkish policy, saying that I was talking about the necessity of not speaking over the heads of other states. It was a specific period, like other countries like Iran is still doing here and there. We need to have a normal state order, regardless of who was elected and who was elected. My third point, a country like Turkey is a pillar, must be a pillar, and should be a pillar in any attempt, which is regionally owned attempt, at building a new stable regional order. Again, based on principles of non-intervention, of ways of containing and handling conflict, of slicing issues to build on what's agreed on and to contain what's not agreed on. Normal interstate relations is a sine qua non conditions to be able to build a normal state order. That's what I meant precisely. And here, certain Arab countries, certain key Arab countries, plus Turkey, plus Iran, on the conditions that they sit and discuss about these matters. What I'd like to see in the coming second Baghdad summit, first Baghdad summit in Iraq, the second Baghdad summit, again, at the risk of repeating myself, to be held in Amman. It needs to be enlarged later, but it needs to start discussing among the key actors what are the criteria of conduct and behavior among states in the region, how we should address differences when they exist, and they do exist, and how should we handle differences in a renormalized state order. I insist on a renormalized state order, despite differences that exist here and there, but in the respect of the sovereignty of each and every state and of differences that exist, and finding a way of managing these differences.
Thank you. Very briefly, my friend Basma, if you can conclude with some recommendations.
Thank you. I will go back to your idea about a need to review the relationship of the states and society, civil society. What kind of new relationship that we have to make to move on? And there is a need of a new social contract, as you said. We have also to admit that the MENA region and the Arab region, they are in a cold war. And we have to think how to surpass this, how to do it. Is it through only summits and dialogue? What are the criteria of a new dialogue between the MENA region? How we can move on? Should we include with the state, civil society, and private sector to this dialogue? How to do it? What's the format? How to follow up? And the follow-up is a big issue in the MENA region. The follow-up of any decisions is always the harder thing that we can have. There is no follow-up, or even there is no motivation for a follow-up, or there is even a need from states sometimes to not follow up what they decided and what they wrote in their conventions and their agreements. We have, is it only this, or we have to work on the mentalities of the youth, these youth that they are immigrating either to the sea or in the religion that we cannot recognize ourselves in it? Is it we have to take care of our youth in our region because they are the future of this region, and we have to rethink how to establish these youth in their countries and how they can build or be a part to build their countries. We push them to do what they have to do in the streets, and then we forget to include them in this dialogue. So maybe it could be some of our webinars about this. Women participation also. I think in Tunisia, we as a woman said stop to the violence in Tunisia when it started, and I think that Tunisia, and I can talk about it, it's still in a transitional process, but the advantage of this process, it's still peaceful, and I think women are really a part of this peaceful process. And what we can do with gender and youth in the future to include them in a dialogue, and what the format of this dialogue in the MENA series dialogue, that it won't stop this Cold War, and to move forward for horizontal relationships between these countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Nassif, you would like to conclude? You're muted, Nassif. You're muted, Nassif.
Yes, now it's fine.
Yep.
I was extremely happy about what Madame Soudani has mentioned about immigration. I always talk about those who immigrate through geography and those who immigrate through history. If they cannot immigrate through geography into past time, wanted to invite the past into today. To address these two sources of immigration, we need a comprehensive process of development based on really establishing a strong society and based on inclusion and based on, again and again, I repeat, on regional cooperation. And for key states in the region, key powers in the region, they must take the initiative in this respect. But again, cooperation based on what we know as interstate relations and as rules and regulations that would govern interstate relations, managing conflict, managing tension, containing them, de-escalating them, and building and identifying what is common interest. And thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. I think you have opened, I wouldn't call it a Pandora box, but you opened the gate wide open to on the challenges facing this region that should not discourage us from adopting the 1,000-mile journey needs the first step. I think we are discussing this, we are delving into that, and as both of you said, this is a long process that needs many elements from all society, from the public and official opinions. We will continue thinking or think tanking in that regard, but also towards a do-tanking, as we noticed lots of slogans, lots of theories, lots of ideals, but very modest results in terms even of thinking. So it is subject of thinking and rethinking, but as I said, towards concrete ideas that will enrich this process towards achieving the objective of the populations of the new or the future generations. I'd like to thank you both and thank all our audience and especially my colleagues at IPI Middle East and North Africa, Dalia and Amira, for making this event come true. We'll have other opportunities, and I'll invite you to look at your mailbox as you will be receiving invitations soon for additional events.